Where's veggie?
It's only called light.
Yeah. Oh, my bad. A light on.
It's just funny, like on one of these cokes, like one of them has 0 calories. Huh? Like, is it like?
No,
Sure,
it's
zero.
zero.
Do they redefine calories, or how do they do it?
And then they also argue when you drink it cold, you have to heat it up. So when you heat it up, you burn more calories than you burn.
Let's walk through.
Oh, that's interesting. So they have a limit of calories, not just water. But still, it's a big drop, and like usually I think now on this one only has like less than 5.
So, no.
You want this there? I'm just taking it off.
Yes, yes. Wow. What is the tendency? Books remind me.
One of them is, this is actually maybe it's even different than label. Okay, fine.
So we're pleased to have Dr. Daniel Litynski. Is it pronounced correctly?
You did correctly, Litynski, yes.
Hey guys,
Yeah.
it's nuts.
So he's going to give us a talk about career planning from an academic leader's perspective.
Right.
Let's welcome him.
Thank you very much. And the important thing is we have food, and I see everybody's getting some, so that's good. And hopefully I'll give a little food for thought also in the presentation. Again, I'm Dan Litynski, currently a professor of electrical and computer engineering at Western Michigan University. I'm on sabbatical this year, and I'd like to, first of all, thank the chapter for inviting me to give a talk. I hope I provide something that's of use to you over the next few minutes. I'd like to also thank Dean Solly, who allowed me to come visit here. I've been doing some interaction with Creole here over the past year. I'll talk a little bit about my background and why I'd like to come here, among other places. I'd also like to thank Ron Driggers, Professor Driggers. I attended his talk in the fall when he talked about career planning. I agree with virtually everything he said. I hope not to repeat a lot of it. There may be some few things in common, you'll see. But he had a very good introduction, I think, particularly looking at the technical standpoint. I'm going to talk a little bit about my background first, because you'll see in my perspective is slightly different. And hopefully I'll add a few things to the conversation. Also, in case it's a distraction, you may wonder why I have a patch on my nose. No, I did not cut my nose shaving this morning. In fact, I was at the Mayo Clinic last week for some surgery to remove a couple spots from my face. Be a word to the wise, put your sunscreen on when you're young. And along the years, I did not, unfortunately. I got quite a bit in the Army, also in the field. So they had to remove a couple things, and I had to keep this patch on for another week or so. Let me also acknowledge a couple things. I got some information from some colleagues of mine to putting this together. Tim Green, friend and colleague, he's currently professor of industrial entrepreneurial engineering and engineering management at Western. He has been the dean of the college there, is also the provost, vice president for academic affairs. He just returned to the faculty also the same time I did for my position as vice president for research. Hussam Tutanji is the current dean there, and Diana Berkshire, who worked with me for the last many years to update some of the statistics and information I want to show you. So what I'm going to try and talk about in the next few minutes are 4 general areas. One perspective, and that's giving my perspective, or you get an idea of what my background has been, so you get an idea of where I'm coming from. Talk about planning, talk about paths, and then a summary at the end. So just to give you some of my educational background, my rank up there, I also happen to be a Brigadier General retired from the United States Army. Spent over 30 years in the Army doing a whole series of things. Have degrees in physics from RPI, Rensselaer, for a bachelor's and a PhD, and also I had my master's in optics from the Institute of Optics in Rochester, where I spent a couple of years. Education, other education, we all have other things, lifelong learners. You'll see some of the military schools I went through. Started off as a tanker, an armor officer, did some logistics stuff. Been at the Command General Staff College and the National Defense University, Industrial College of the Armed Forces in Washington, D.C. So if you look at an Army officer's career, in the first 20 some odd years, I spent about 6 years in schools of various kinds, whether it was for formal education or certificate education or whatever the case may be. And those covered all kinds of topics, from business to psychology to international relations and various things. Started out as a tanker. I took ROTC in college. Intended to go in the Army for 6 months and get out at that time. 30 years later, my wife was asking me, well, how long are you going to stay in? So we did leave the service shortly thereafter. Not for that reason, but anyway, what I did learn as an armor officer at the beginning for a couple of years, part of that was in Vietnam. I spent 2 years in Southeast Asia. But you learn about the needs of the customer. In this case, the soldier in the field, as well as some of your allies and things. So that was, I think, a useful experience. I wouldn't want to repeat again. Nevertheless, it was extremely useful. I was in the 2nd 34th Armor, the B Company. We operated around Saigon. Other things I did in the Army, perhaps in the Army in the field, again, I was ordnance. After 2 years of armor, I was ordnance, which is research and development, material development. I spent time in research labs as well as in logistical units in the field. I was at the, I think I have later on the slide, but I spent time at the ballistics research lab, Harry Diamond labs, and other things, doing different kinds of things, laser research. I'll talk about that a bit. Also spent time, not counting the time at West Point, spent time in Germany. I lived 2 years in Germany. Actually, I spent 6 months in Poland as a visiting professor and 6 months at Carnegie Mellon, Software Engineering Institute as a visiting professor. But the Army typically just spend time in the field as well as in garrison assignments, and mine were primarily in research and development. And this talks a little bit about, the Army Research Lab now. I spent time at Ballistics Research Lab at Aberdeen Proving Ground doing high energy laser propagation through the near Earth atmosphere. At that time, a long time ago, we were actually trying to measure turbulence in the atmosphere, see what's happening to the beam. We looked at beam interaction with metallic targets. We did some of the first modeling and actually experimentation and visualization of the plasma interaction with high energy lasers, as well as at Harry Diamond Labs. I did work in gas discharge lasers, low power lasers, looking at nitrogen as a super radiant at the time, working with chemical additives and gas lasers to increase power. That actually eventually led to my both theory and experimentation for my PhD thesis at RPI. Those all units are part of Army Research Labs now. So that, in fact, after my time, I was first in the physics department at West Point for about 4 years. Completed my PhD while I was doing that. And then left, went to Germany for a couple of years, came back on the faculty permanent at West Point. Did research with a group at RPI and IBM in terms of optical signal processing, surface acoustic waves, smart pixels, those types of things. All that's been published elsewhere, and there's about 50 publications roughly. And also worked in educational innovation and pedagogical innovation, working with various groups and the National Science Foundation. And eventually ended up at the National Science Foundation for a few years. At West Point, as I said, I was, if you haven't been to West Point, this is it. And it is really, that's west. So there is a point. And the purpose of the point sticking into the river, the reason why it was important in the Revolutionary War, if you remember your history, the British wanted to cut off the New England colonies from the rest. And they were going to use the Hudson River to do it. So fortifications were put up by actually, the engineer of West Point was Kosciuszko, Tadeusz Kosciuszko, and put fortifications around here, put chains on floating across the river to stop British shipping, and British shipping could never get through after that. The river there is 190 feet deep. It does 2 right angles right there. It is tidal, so there's the river flows north or south depending on the time of day, and there's a 4-foot tide. One of these is my sailboat, I think, right there, that I used to have. And sailing on the Hudson is always interesting because in addition to the, as you can imagine, 190-foot river, lots of swirls and things going on, Because of the mountains, there are winds that are swirling. There are ocean liners that go by on the way to Albany. So if you're in your sailboat and you hear a large horn behind you, get out of the way, because it takes them a quarter of a mile to do anything, and you'll be a blip on their screen if you don't get out of the way. But that's, Newburgh is about 20 miles up on top. While there, again in the physics department, I came back in the EE department, electrical engineering, assistant professor, researcher, head of the department. We combined and became head of the electrical engineering and computer science department. So I've taught about 20 different courses in electrical engineering, computer science, physics, optics. I created several courses in optics there and where I am now. So that's kind of my that background. We also started, as part of that department, I started, was part of a group that started several research centers. Photonics Research Center was one of them. It was a joint venture with chemistry, physics, and our Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science. And that was eventually funded by the Pentagon with a line item of a few $1 million. And it still exists to this day, and it's under technical supervision, comes under ARO, our Army Research Office. Other work. We also had another research center in artificial intelligence that we started, and another one now they have in, well, it evolved, basically in signals and software engineering. In terms of other things, I was the National Science Foundation for 3 years later on, division director and program officer in physics. Of course, we're all hopefully members of societies. I know you're members of SPIE, or should be, right? That's one of them, of course, the Optical Society of America, and I'm also a IEEE member and the IEEE Education Society, and I was an officer over the years and was actually president of the society for some period of time. I'm president emeritus now, and you can see some of the others there. Also have done international consulting. I spent some time in the 90s, actually, after the wall came down and Central Europe and Eastern Europe opened up. I was part of an international group that helped set up an international faculty of engineering at the Technical University of Łódź, Politechnika Łódzka, and was their first visiting professor and taught computer science in English. I speak Polish, but this was the idea was to have everything taught in English, either by native speakers or people who have English as a second language. We started with 30 students. They now have some 900. They're part of a 17,000 student university, but this particular one teaches now both in English and French, and both in engineering courses and in other courses. So that has been going on. I also was a consultant, led a team to the Slovak Military Academy, Lithuanian Military Academy. I do not speak Slovakian, but it turns out if I spoke Polish and they spoke Slovakian, we understood about a third of each other's conversation. It's close enough, just across the border. So, and I've also done strategic planning and consulting with universities, companies, government agencies, and most places I've been to try to get things moving in the right direction. And we'll talk a little bit about planning in a moment. So my last positions have been at Western Michigan University. I went there to be the Dean of Engineering. I went there because I liked the challenge. They had a farmer's field, and they wanted to build a new engineering college. They already had an engineering college. They wanted a new facility. So on 270 acres, and we built this, which is the engineering college. There's also a business technology and research park, an innovation center, and some other things now along with that. I remember when I first got there, the president said, well, I've got about $52 million I can give you to build it. So I did some back of the envelope calculations. I talked to a bunch of people around the country. I went back, I said, I need $80 million to do this. And he gulped. And he came back about a week later and said, I'll give you 72. And I said, okay. So we went with that. The whole thing cost, and that was just for the building. The whole thing cost, putting the building in and the infrastructure and all the rest, about $100 million. And right now with the other stuff that's been put in, there's about a $150 million project there, which is successful, and the BTR has been extremely successful, Business Technology and Research Park, full of companies now, and we're actually expanding even further than that. So I did that for 3 years, and then the president asked me to become the provost. How many know what a provost is? What's the provost do? Who can tell me what a provost does?
You're in charge of all the academic.
Right, okay. the provost, at most colleges, and in our college certainly, you have a set of deans, and you have a set of vice presidents, and then you have the president. The provost is the vice president in charge of all academic affairs. So typically all the colleges, the library, academic things report to the provost. So we did, the provost that was there stepped down on short notice, and he asked me if I'd be the provost. I had to go through a whole process of interviews and things with faculty and all the rest of it. I said, fine. I did that for 2 years. By about 3 months after I took the job, he took another job at another university. So the board asked me to be the president of the university for a while until we found a new one. So I was president of the university for 6 months. So it's kind of like the Army, keep changing jobs quickly, just be prepared. And that's something I like to talk about later, always be prepared, because you never know what's going to happen. So we did that, we had a new president. And then I had an opportunity to go to the National Science Foundation, so I did that. I always wanted to do that for 3 years. I was, like I say, division director and program officer, and read lots of proposals. So I read thousands of proposals from all kinds of people. If you want to talk about writing proposals, I'll be happy to do that. And then I came back from National Science Foundation. I was going to go back to the faculty, and they asked me to be the dean of engineering again. I said, no, I've done that. And they said, well, we can do it for a year because Tim Green, my friend, who was the dean, became the provost. So I did that for a year while they did a search. And then they asked me to be the vice president for research. I've done that for the last 7 years. So again, the VP for research looks at research across the entire university in all the different areas. And that has been a very interesting job. I stepped down from that last August, and I'm returning to the faculty. I'll give you a quick overview. Western is about 23,000 students, 257 programs. We've got some top programs, first or in the top 10 in the country in various areas. 7 degree granting colleges. Interesting one is the College of Aviation, if you like to fly. We do that. We educate pilots as well as people who work in the aviation industry. And you see some of the others. 2 new units. We just started a medical school, and they just had their first graduates and fully accredited now. We had a $100 million gift from the Stryker Corporation and Stryker family to start that in cash. And they've actually been adding more. And we just affiliated with the Thomas Cooley Law School, so we have all law, medicine, and all the others right now. Probably can skip this, but we have, just the only thing I want to point out, economic impact of a university. Creole, I'm sure, has a much larger one because you're about 60,000 students and more than that. We have 8 regional locations around the state, and actually we have 2 locations now in Florida because Cooley Law School had places here. So our aviation college is now teaching flying part of the year in Tampa and Punta Gorda. So, and also our health and human services nursing programs and physician assistant programs that are now available there in Florida. Just pictures of the School of Medicine. The campus was donated by the Upjohn family, and pictures of the law school, and they're again around the country. Okay, so let's talk about planning. Where are we going to be 5, 10, 20 years from now? Where are you going to be? Where am I going to be? We all have our own plans, I think. What do we want to do? Where do we want to go? Where are we now? How do we get to where we want to go? And who goes with us? Helps us along the way, or who are we going to help as we go? Industry, government, academia, entrepreneur. What roles will we play when we do that? And where do we start? What's the first position to look for? And what are decision makers looking for when they hire someone? And I've been through the hiring process on both ends, looking for jobs and hiring people of all types. And so we can talk about that if you'd like to a little bit later. Talk a little bit about the planning process. And this is a general process that I've used, and others. People have different processes for strategic planning, tactical planning, whatever. You can use this at an individual level, you can use this at an organizational level or agency, or you can use a similar one. But there are some common components that are useful, I think, when any of us are doing planning. The ones on the left, vision, mission, values, goals, and objectives, those are the general ones, and often these are the easier ones to come up with, frankly. You have to think about it, but you can do that. The ones on the right side are the tougher ones where the rubber meets the road. You gotta set priorities, because usually you're limited in scope in terms of time, money, action plans, who's gonna do what, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Metrics, studying metrics, creating them, assessing and evaluating, and review and analysis. And the last part of that is, once you do that, is to actually act on your review and analysis. Let's talk just a little bit about each of these. When we talk about a vision, that word can mean different things to different people. But who, typically in planning, it's a state of being. Who are we, or who do we want to be? You know, what is our vision? Who do you want yourself to be? Who do you want our organization to be? If you look out over the long term now, are we going to be the best optical sciences department in the world? Real. Are we going to be the best engineer or scientist? Are we going to be the whatever? Okay. And everybody has their own aspirations, but sometimes we have them in the back of our mind, but we don't write them down. And sometimes it's helpful to just write it down. Mission, what do we do? Okay, the vision is who we want to be. The mission is what do we do? Those are action things, verbs, rather than state of being. Third is values. What things will guide you even when there's no guidance otherwise? And as you get into decision making, there are times where it's not black and white, it's gray. And what's going to happen in those gray areas is your values hopefully will come out. In other words, what would you do or what wouldn't you do? In the case of a boss wants you to do this, you don't quite feel right about it. So I've had cases where I actually had to go and talk to my boss and say, you know, that's not the way it should be. And sometimes you have to be prepared to walk away from the job even. And I've had friends who've had to do that. They were in some situations where things were not being ethical and they stepped away, and, you know, or not, or is it better to stay there and try to fix the problem? So there are things that, but those values, and you have to come, everyone has to do that individually. What are the values? Mine are things like integrity, respect, excellence in performance, a whole series of things. But each individual has to have their own goals, values. Goals. What multi-year outcomes do we envision? I want to get my PhD in 4 years or something, or 2 years or 7 years, whatever the case may be. Those are long-term goals. How are those consistent with the top three things? Objectives, what short-term accomplishments? This year, I'm going to do this. And I'm going to pass my quals, whatever the case may be, right? Or just make it through the semester, you know, or get all A's this semester, whatever the case may be, you know? So those are objectives, those are the short-term things. And then priorities, what am I going to do first, second, and third? Okay, I got to take this course, and I've got to take the quals or comps. Okay, how am I going to prioritize my time? The coin of the realm is time. We only have so much. If you have a constrained resource, what do we do? What's core to the operation, and what can we let go till later? Then, action plans, okay? I like to think of myself as I'm a boss and a worker. My boss within me has to say, okay, these are the plans we're going to do, and then the worker within me has to say, well, okay, I'm going to do it. So those are the action plans. I'm going to sit down and, in fact, what detailed steps will I take to accomplish those objectives I was talking about? And particularly if you're organizing, if you're in a team and you have other people that you're working with, and if you're the boss or the team leader, whatever the case may be, who's responsible? What resources will you commit to help that person do their job? Or do they have to go get them on their own? That's another decision. And what's the schedule? Okay, so who does it? When does it get done? And what resources do we need to get the job done? You can do that in your own life, you can do that in teams, you can do that in large organizations. Then metrics, how do we know we're succeeding? I want to pass this course. Okay, how do I know if I'm succeeding? Well, I passed this quiz and I did this oral or whatever the case may be, and I'm on track. So the metric is perhaps performance. I'm a runner. In the Army, you had to pass a PT test every 6 months or you get kicked out of the Army. Okay, it's a 2-mile run. A 2-mile run you have to do in 8 minutes or 4 minutes or 10 minutes, depending on how old you are. They do cut you a little slack for age. Okay, so the question, the metric is, how fast do I run the 2 miles? Okay, without putting a standard on it. The metric is how fast do I run the 2 miles. Now, I can go out and run every day, and I can say, oh, I'm getting better. Well, that is, I'm doing it faster and faster. Or I'm doing it slower, that's a problem. Okay. But then, on that metric, which is, I'm assessing my performance on that metric, I haven't evaluated it yet. And people argue about this, but I see a difference between assessment and evaluation. If I'm assessing how fast I'm running, I'm just looking at, am I going faster and faster and faster, am I doing it performance-wise, whatever. But then there's a standard. In the Army, they wanted me to run it in X minutes. That's the standard. And the metric will measure that too. I may be assessing my run, but the standard is I've got to hit this performance in that period of time, okay? So that's a little bit of the difference. You assess one, you evaluate the other. So you did meet the standard, or you did not, I did not, whatever the case may be. And then finally, a review and analysis. You make a plan, don't just take it and put it on a shelf. That's one of the most frustrating things for people in universities. If you do strategic planning for a year, and you take it, you put it on the shelf, and nobody does anything about it. You do the same thing in your own life. I do, I try. I don't say I'm perfect at it. But okay, if I had a plan, and I did all this stuff, am I on track or not? Is my performance the problem? Is the plan the problem? Should I change my performance or change the plan? Maybe the plan is obsolete. Maybe it's, something has happened. So that's another area. So there's, and a friend of mine, Joanne Horton, actually drew this a couple years back. You usually have a strategic planning cycle and an operational planning cycle. So you do the long-term planning and the short-term planning, and you should be doing both as you go along. So, in general, make a plan, find a mentor, and review the plan with the mentor or more. Follow the plan, but be flexible. There's an old saying that, in the Army certainly, at least, you plan carefully, you train hard, you execute rapidly, and be prepared to stop and turn on a moment's notice, because as soon as the first shot's fired, the plan may go out the door. But if you've done the other part, you're prepared to deal with that. So you've done the planning, so you're flexible. And same thing in our own lives. What's our flexibility? If suddenly our discipline goes away and they don't need optics anymore, okay, not going to happen. But if that were, let's say your sub-discipline goes away, what's the next thing you're going to do? There's always should be thinking in your mind, what's plan B? I've got a plan A, what's plan B? Just quick, this is kind of, this plan evolved over time, but I ended up knowing a long time ago I wanted education. I liked research, I liked to do the kinds of things. I happened to be in the Army. How can I make that work for me? So I ended up working in a whole series of things. And down here I did a bunch of things on the technical side. And down here I did a bunch of things on the educational side, educational research. So, a couple different areas. And I ended up doing different things over here. Here we do stuff, we publish, we get patents, we do whatever. Build centers, research centers, build, engineering colleges. Over here we work in leadership and changing the culture and whatever. Each of us have to choose what we want to do. And then we try to influence policy, which, go to NSF, look at the national level. Okay, what kind of paths can we follow? Lots of different ones. You have great opportunities. Sometimes I envy you guys. There's so many things coming up in the future. You can choose. But in general, academia, education, slightly different than academia. It could be at a different level. Entrepreneur, government, industry, and what roles will we play? It could be a technical professional and spend your entire life doing that, and that's a great career. A lot of people love to do that. You can be another professional. I know lots of people who started off in engineering or science, went to get a law degree, went to get an MD, and they did other things with it. And some became patent lawyers, some became medical researchers. So there's lots of things you can do. Be creative, and you may find things that you love to follow. Sometimes doors open and doors close. If a door closes and it's really it's shut tight, there may be a door that opens, and maybe that's a way to go. So be flexible. And you could be managerial, or you could be executive level, leading things eventually, or even soon. Academia, some pros and cons, and these are mine. Some people will say the pros are cons and cons are pros, depending on what you like. But pros, intellectual freedom. You have an opportunity to educate the next generation, create new knowledge. You serve all kinds of constituents. And if you get tenure, you have position security. And we'll talk about tenure later. Cons, there is performance pressure in 3 areas: research, teaching, and service. It's up or up at most universities for tenure. If you don't make tenure, thank you very much for your service. Within a year, you're gone someplace else. Compensation may be lower. On the other hand, you may be able to get other things to supplement your compensation, research grants, work with industry, contracts, whatever. There are entrepreneurial demands in the university, and there's always the issue of politics. These happen to be academic politics. There's politics everywhere. It's people interacting with people, so just be prepared for that. Some of the roles, I think I mentioned some of that. Teaching, you've got formal classes, online labs. Some people don't think about the advising, and hopefully you have good advisors. That takes time, and it's a lot of fun, actually. And you get to see, I enjoy interacting with, obviously, the students, both at the graduate and undergraduate level. Student chapter advising. Research, of course, funded and unfunded publications. Mentor and mentee. Get yourself a mentor, be a mentor as well. And then service to the department, college, university, and professional service to the profession at large. So those are some of the, roles of a faculty member. Now this is the courtesy of my friend Tim. He kind of grouped, and you can group many different ways. Carnegie does a classification also. 3 types of universities. Anyway, of note, up on the top, in 2015 there were 4,627 institutions of post-secondary education in the United States. So there's a large universe out there. Different kind. Down at the bottom you'll see community colleges. There were 1,700 of those. So there's about 3,000 4-year and up institutions of higher learning. And again, this is Tim's, I think it's a good one. Class A, heavy on research. Graduate education, less focus on undergraduate teaching, sometimes almost no focus on service. Class B, kind of a balance, and Class C, more on undergraduate teaching and less on research. So you have heavier teaching load. So again, some people enjoy one or the other. Some friends have gone into places that are high in teaching, and they love that. Some that are high in research. You have to make your choice. Just to give you an idea of a university, because in your mind, what's the structure of a university? For example, at Western, we have almost 1,500 faculty, of which 900 are tenure track. And the rest are part-time, and we have 50 chairs over 50 departments, 55, I think, at this point. Some full-time research staff. You can see the PhD, master's, undergraduate levels. A lot of graduate assistantships and things like that available. As a dean or a chair or a provost, you worry about getting the money to help you complete your education. Okay, so through various ways. These are when I say discovery units, these are the ones who actually have done research as they passed through my office the last few years. In addition to the colleges, you'll find people in various places, certainly the law school, medical school, the various vice presidential areas have research centers that report to them. I had an evaluation center, which is nationally, internationally known, reporting to me as the vice president for research. And they do evaluation for the National Science Foundation, for the Russian equivalent of the National Science Foundation, the Swiss National Science Foundation, the equivalent. So those kinds of things also happen. Just be aware of it. It's not just in the departments. There may be research going on in other areas in the university. So how do you find a faculty position? Well, lots of different ways. These are just a few. If you're a PhD student or a master's student, and if you're a master's, you want to go teach at a community college, you can do that. It's typically, of course, a research university, you need a PhD, although there are some exceptions. But your major professor, committee members, department chairs, other faculty members that can help network at conferences. Search firms typically don't interact at the assistant professor level. Okay, as you get to higher levels, and particularly people who are doing research, established search firms may get involved. If you're going to managerial positions, executive positions, chairs, deans, presidents of universities, search firms will be very involved in finding you a job and finding a match with the university. Trade magazines, certainly. Chronicle of Higher Education, if you haven't looked at that one. And certainly the Photonics and Optics magazines, the ASW Prism. And there's lots of opportunities overseas. We're finding more and more in various places. So, you've applied to a place They said, yeah, we're interested. Okay, well first you gotta send them something, right? So you send them a cover, typically the application has a cover letter, a vita, and references. And usually they won't call the references unless they're really interested. And they'll usually ask you, can I call your references? Because it's that point. There may be a telephone or conference interview. We Skype these days all over the place. And you may have that for an initial interview. Then, assuming if you have one and you pass that, then you'll come through to the on-campus interview. Usually you'll have to present a seminar on your research, which is a public thing anybody can come to. And you'll meet with faculty members, chairs, deans, vice presidents, and students, and you'll tour the campus and community. Why would they come to talk to the vice president of research, for example? Well, if you're a new faculty member, or you want to be a new faculty member, you need money to start your lab. The vice president for research has money. So, and usually I would split between myself and the chairs and the colleges on putting together a startup package. We'll talk about that in a minute. So, now think of this as the dating game. Okay, you're trying to see if there's a match between you and the university or the department or whatever the case may be. Do your homework ahead of time. Find out all you can about that job, department, even the university or college. They will be impressed if you know something about what's going on. Actually, they expect that you've done some of that homework. Be prepared to tell them how you can contribute. If I go to a job and I find out what their interests are, what their missions are, what their gaps are, how can I contribute to that institution, to that job, to whatever? Okay. Is there a gap that needs to be filled? I would try to do that. There's nothing off the record. Assume that anything you say during a job interview is going to be circulated through the group. Okay. But be honest. Okay. Because again, this is the dating game. You want to ensure that there's a good match. The worst thing you want to do is, there's a misunderstanding, and 2 years down the road, you find out there's a misunderstanding in your goals and their goals, and you've wasted 2 years of your life, and they've wasted 2 years of funding and all the rest, and it doesn't get good at that point. So try to find out what's going on. Again, how do you fit on both sides? There's some questions. What courses will you teach? What's the research focus? Where can you get funding? What are your career expectations and plans? And why do you want this position? So the first two questions I've asked many, many people is, why do you want the job? And what do you bring to the table? And then I'll let them talk. That's the general introduction. Because, if you want the job, I'd like to see some passion in somebody who's coming in for a job. And how can you help our organization, to do that? We're going to help you, obviously. I talked about providing resources, but we need to know what's the fit. And again, be prepared to ask respectful questions. Just a bit about the seminar. Again, I said it's open about 30 to 35 minutes. In PowerPoint typically, summary of your research, your dissertation, wherever you are. They're looking to see, can you think on your feet? Can you present? That's part of it. Do you understand your area of research? And you understand the impact of it? How deep have you gone into it? In some cases, people haven't quite finished they're in the, they haven't written or defended yet, but they're finishing their dissertation. They want to know how far into it. How much have I contributed to my research, or did my advisor do it all, and I was just doing something else? Because at this point, we want a leader coming in as an assistant professor. We don't want a follower. Okay, so how are you going to lead? And what are the extensions of your research? Okay, you're going to finish your PhD. Well, what's next? Because that's where you're going to be. You're going to be doing something else, hopefully. What should you ask about? What should I ask about? And I've done this. Okay, and you do this later, typically. When they're talking about making an offer, you don't usually start off asking, well, how much am I going to get and how long is my vacation? That's not the first question you should ask. Okay. Once there's a match, you say, okay, well, what is the salary, including summer salary? Again, a faculty member works 8, 9 months typically out of the year for the academic year, and then there's the summer. And is that research? Is that teaching? Can you teach during the summer? Usually, for new faculty, would light load them for the first couple of years because you're trying to get funding. So you're trying to write proposals, you're trying to get organized, get your lab organized. We might have given you a startup package. So we want you to get that organized. So we'll light load the faculty, but then by the third year, you're going to be teaching whatever we expect as a full load, which might be if you're doing research, 2 courses a semester. Okay, undergraduate and graduate course, and doing research. If you're not doing research, you may end up teaching 3 courses, and doing more service. Okay, that's kind of the chair has to make those decisions. But what are the benefits? Our university, for example, is a great benefits package. Actually, it costs, if your salary is, to pick a number, $100,000 a year, our benefits package costs $50,000 on top of that. We pay your medical, insurance, put 11% into a retirement fund for you, and you don't have to contribute anything to match that. You just get it, and all kinds of things. So, are there benefits go along with it? Is there a startup package? Particularly in science and engineering, you're looking at some funding that will get you started in the first couple of years before you get your own funding coming in. And some of those things are important. And what are the expectations that they have? And what is the promotion and tenure criteria? Oh, I put this in because this sometimes happens these days. If you have a significant other or a spouse, and they are a professional or they're looking for a job, are there any ways that the university assists with that? In some cases, we've had dual hires where we hire somebody in one department and they had a spouse, could be male or female, and another department had an opening and it was a match, so we were able to bring both on. I think you know most of this, but quick run through, those are the ranks for the tenure track, board appointed faculty and board of trustees, instructor, assistant, associate, and then professor, full professor. There are a bunch of specialty ranks that may show up at different universities. What is the process of tenure? For us, it's a 6-year process. I talked to people around here, it seems to be similar here. But in our case, you're in probationary status for 6 years. You get an interim review every 2 years. Reviewed by the faculty within your department, as well as administrators up the chain. The chair, the dean, and the provost will write a report. And you submit documentation each time on what you've been doing in terms of service, teaching, research, and service. Don't expect much service from an assistant professor, some. As you get more mature in the progression, we expect more. I mentioned that here. We're looking at accomplishments, not level of effort. You could be working 24 hours a day. That's nice, but what did you do? How many papers have you published? How much funding have you brought in? Are you teaching? Are your students satisfied? Those kinds of things. We want accomplishments. And each department and each university is a little bit different, so you got to find out what the details are. Pros and cons, government and industry. So let's move to another one. Pros, mission oriented. You notice it's also on the side, cons. Depends on whether you like it or not. Okay, but you're going to be more focused if you're in industry or in the government because it's a mission oriented organization as compared to an academic where you have some constraints, but you have more freedom to choose what you want to do. Some people like that, some people don't. Compensation's often higher. You're serving customers. You may have large funding, may have may be able to direct major initiatives. And the government, you can get some measure of security after a period of probation. I have a daughter and 2 sons. One of my sons is a civil engineer. He happened to go the government route. He's a civil engineer out of Virginia Tech and Johns Hopkins. Started off in a contractual basis. Now he's ended up as a GS-15 in Department of Energy downtown managing $1 million portfolios in carbon sequestration. Okay, so that's one possible route. My other son, our other son, took a degree in physics, was in graduate school, got an offer to represent German optical firms, and he did that. Eventually started his own company in the United States representing German optical firms. Then since left that, decided he wanted to go, now he's with a large corporation doing marketing and technical marketing, that type of thing. Actually design and sales type thing. So there's lots of different ways to go. Again, performance pressure. You want to see the bottom line? They have a double bottom line. What's the double bottom line? Anybody know? The bottom line is dollars. Okay, are we making a profit or not? Sometimes some companies and the university and some things I've been involved in, I've sat on the Biosciences Research Commercialization Center board of directors. In addition to just making a profit, you want some other thing, goodwill. You want to stimulate growth industries. That's what our double bottom line is. How many industries, startups, frankly, have we funded and have they been successful? So it's not just a matter of the dollar. So sometimes that happens. Positions are sometimes funding dependent, and you may be an at-will employee. Funding goes away on a government contract, loved you, you did a great job, but there's no money, okay? So that may happen. And politics are still there. Different level. Where can you find jobs in the government? You go to this job site, usajobs.gov, and you can find all kinds of things. These are the most urgent hiring needs right now in the federal government. If you go there also, you'll see more information. There are 343 job series in the general schedule, okay? And I just extracted a couple. For example, I did this because it was tied to the titles. 801 series is general engineering and architecture. There's a bunch of other engineering. 1310 are physics. And you'll see the pay grades go from GS5 to GS15, which is the highest level. If you click on those, you go a little bit deeper. A general engineer, and it'll tell you they'll typically jump every couple of grades. This is the average salary in 2016 paid to them. There are 9,654 engineers, general engineers, in the federal government, and a total of $1.23 billion. And Department of Energy hired the most. My son is one of them. If you go a little further down that page, it'll tell you where they work, how many are working there, and what their average salary is. Okay, so that's just, again, a resource if you want to take a look at it. The other one I thought you might be interested in is physicist. You'll notice the salary is a little bit higher, $134,000 average. You'll notice there's only 785 of them as compared to 9,000 something. Okay, different. And they, instead of a GS scale, they're off the scientific and engineering professional pay scale by and large. In other words, both engineers and physicists may be on a different pay scale. Scientific and engineering may be a little bit higher. Okay, so in this case, most of the physicists are under that one. There are also some GS also, I'm sure. And again, this tells you where they were hired. NIST has most of the physicists. Okay, not surprising. But there are others. What kind of positions? Well, I think you probably know. You can be a scientist, engineer, you go into technical marketing, patent law, chief scientist, chief engineer, research physician, and then the managerial steps, if you want to choose to do that. Project team leader, program officer, division director, agency director, and these are some of the places you can go. Again, you can find a lot of that in that website. How do you find a position? Probably the same way you did with the others. I won't spend time on that, but talk to people. The websites are a good source there. Entrepreneurship. Again, I've been involved with that over the last few years in particular. Entrepreneur is somebody who's got an idea, wants to make money on it. It's not just making money. It's also, in many cases, doing something good for humanity. We have 2 students and a faculty member who designed a neonatal device that could be used in the third world at much less expense. And that's really their passion. Now, they want to make money so they can get it out there. Okay, so making money to them is really the means to disseminate this, particularly one of the students from India. And that's all I need in certain parts of India to do that. So, but they're entrepreneurs. They actually have patents, several patents on this thing now. Now, 2 of them are in medical school. They're engineers now in medical school. And we were helping them to, we prosecuted the patents for them and everything else. Now, note this though. You got to think. Lack of funding, bad business decisions, economic crisis, and lack of market demand are the things that usually kill a startup. I work with venture capitalists. They talk about, and they invest a little bit later, but they talk about succeeding 1 out of 10 times. If they can get a good hit 1 out of 10 times, they're happy, and assuming they make their money back. Are people interested in entrepreneurship? Poll a few days ago. These are a poll of employees around the country, statistical poll. Overall, 57% want to do something in freelancing. Millennials, 74%, Gen X 57%, Boomers 43%. And you can see those planning to do it in the next 5 years. And in case you forgot, these are the classifications. The older ones, born before 1945, traditionalists from the silent generation, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials or Gen Y, centennials or Gen Z, so you can figure out which category you're in. And I remember hearing many talks by people who study generations, and one was, you are who you were when. In other words, what were your formative years, and what were the things that influenced us? And that's how they generally break them for the major events that shaped the formation of individuals in that group. Whether it was 9/11, World War II, Korean War, and all kinds of major events, depressions, recessions, whatever the case may be. Why is that important? I noted at the top, I shouldn't go so fast. Those are both customers, employees, and coworkers. And different ones will react in different ways. So if you're working with someone in a different generation, they have different cultures, different values, just be prepared to deal with that. There's nothing good or bad about it, just a matter of being aware of it and being able to deal with it. And using the right approach when you do so. Pros, get to pursue your passion, agile, freedom of direction, rewards could be great. Cons, rewards are not guaranteed, okay? And it's high risk and a lot of commitment. I've worked with people who have done startups and some very successful, but it's a full commitment. You're not working 40 hours a week. You're in there and doing everything you need to do. But you want to make sure you meet market needs and other demands. And let me just quickly go. These are 10 characteristics that set successful entrepreneurs apart. And you can kind of read through them. But passion and motivation, risk-taking, you've got to believe in yourself and nobody else does. This is important, product and market knowledge. And if you're interested in doing that, the I-Corps, the NSF, and others have programs, SPIE, TTR, that help you go out and learn how to market and analyze the market, primarily. That's what you need to do. You got to have strong money management. If you don't, hire somebody who does, or get a partner. Effective planning, and you can see the others. Exit preparedness, what's that mean? What's exit preparedness?
Plan B.
Plan B, that's right. Either your market collapses and you need a way to get out without totally ruining, or somebody comes in and gives you a great offer for your company, and there's that tug of war. This is mine, I don't want to give it up. But maybe it's time to give it up because you may never get another offer and it's time to move on to something else. So always, if you're going to do that, think about exit, how you're going to exit. What do you need to do? Most important, a business plan. When I sit down with people and talk about, if you're going to do this, you got to do a business plan. Get some mentors, legal advice. What's the form of the corporation? Going to be single owner, LLC, whatever. And you'll see some financing and funding. You need 3 years of capital usually to make it through before money comes rolling in. How are you going to take care of yourself in the first 3 years before the money starts rolling in? And some of the other considerations. So, just a few suggestions here. I'm kind of towards the end. Regardless of which path you take, there's position acquisition and position advancement. Position acquisition, I talked a little bit about that. Research the job, understand what the job is, be prepared to say how you contribute, and be prepared to answer the question, why do you want the job and what do you bring to the table? Position advancement, I would say know yourself, know myself. As I said, what personal values that I want to carry with me and what will I do and what limits do I have? But those are some of the, excuse me, like integrity, respect, ethics. What is your personal plan? How does that fit in with the corporate plan or the organizational plan? And metacognition, be your own primary career manager. Somebody told me a long time ago to do that. And there are lots of people who give you advice, including me. Take that advice, listen to it, but you're the decision maker. You have to decide what you want to do. Take the bits of the important parts with little kernels of truth in there and use it for yourself. But be your own career manager, supervisor, worker, personnel agent. You have to decide what you want to do. When you're on the job, know your job and do it well. Again, activities versus accomplishments. What are you accomplishing? And don't be afraid to tell your boss or whoever what you're doing. Sometimes they may not recognize it. Have a sit down once in a while and just talk about how things are going. You don't have to brag, but just make sure they are aware of what's going on. How are you adding value now? Know your boss's job. It might be yours on short notice. I've had that happen to me several times. Okay, so know your job. Actually know your co-worker's job if you can. Sometimes that's difficult. But know your boss's job and you might step in. Leader and team member, know when to be in either role or both. In most jobs I've been in, I'm both a team member and a leader. Vice president for research. I'm a team member with the other vice presidents. I'm a leader of my division of research, okay? But even in my division of research, there are some senior people that I consider a team rather than, being their boss, even though I am. And know how to be prepared to step up. If you see that if a team needs a lead and nobody's taking the lead, be prepared to, in a nice way, say, okay, well, maybe we could do this, and maybe eventually because there are informal leaders and formal leaders, and sometimes the formal leaders are not the best ones, so sometimes the informal leaders have to take charge. An old adage, we reward performance, promote on potential. There are some people who do great jobs, wonderful jobs, and that's as high as they really are able to go, okay? Sometimes, and that's fine, okay? Sometimes they prefer that. I've had people who said, I don't want to do anything else, I don't want to be promoted, I don't want to be a manager. I love what I'm doing, and that's great, and they're good at it. Don't promote somebody into a job that they don't want and don't have the capability to perform in. And think about yourself too. Those are things, sometimes it's an honor. People say, well, would you like to do this? Oh yeah, that's great. But then you don't have an inclination, you don't have the skills. So you either better get the inclination and get the skills if you want to take that job. And that's fine too. It's one thing if you aspire to it and you want to learn to do the job, that's fine. So, in summary, talked a little bit about my background just to give you an idea where I'm coming from. So, we all have biases, so I have mine, and so you know where I'm coming from. I talked about planning. I think it's important, no matter what context, personal or organizational. We talked about the different paths that we can take. That's not all of them, and hopefully provided a few suggestions along the way. And that's it. Do you have any questions? And I hope that provided a little bit of information for you. Questions? Yes, sir.
Actually, looking at your experiences in the past, like how dynamic or how fluid do you see this interface between academia on the one side and industry on the other? Like if you start in one, but at some point you say, maybe it's not my thing, I want to jump maybe to the other side or back or whatever.
I think it depends. It depends on the discipline. I think in science and engineering, particularly in engineering, it's more fluid. People move back and forth, has been my experience. As a dean, I was looking for people with industrial experience to bring into the faculty, for example, because I want people with real world experience to be able to teach the students and also bring the research with them with real problems. So, sure, and thanks for being. In some of the other disciplines, I think, let's just keep it to science and engineering, because I think it's where we are. But some of the other disciplines are not. They look askance on people from government or industry coming into academia. Well, I've never found that in engineering. People value, and the other way too. I've seen people leave our faculty, go into industry, do various things, and then sometimes come back to another university. So it depends on the discipline and the institution, I think. But I think it's certainly a possibility, and I think it adds value, frankly, for faculty members and industry. It depends on whether you're applying to theoretical also to some extent. If you're applied science, we talk about theory, but you're actually looking at a product. Then it's easier to move back and forth, I think, particularly move into industry. But like I said, when I was hiring, and certainly in other places I've seen, people welcome people from industry to come into academia. Any questions? Yes, sir.
You said the success rate of most startups is like 10%.
Well, that was for venture capitalists.
Yeah, that's from VC. But let's say you take some money from a VC, and then you start a startup, and most likely you fail, right?
Yes.
So doesn't that weaken your position for the next job?
No.
Why?
We have mentors that we bring in from around Michigan, and the Michigan Research Universities have a kind of a consortium with the state of Michigan. So they have mentors who have been entrepreneurs, and they come in as mentors to help faculty and students, whatever. You know, one of the best ones we have had, it was on his third business. The first two failed. The third one, and the fourth one, he had 4 businesses. The third and the fourth were successful. You'll learn a lot in failure. The question is, you know, you want to make sure, sometimes, somebody once said, it's not that you can knock down, it's how you pick yourself up. So always have other possibilities. Make sure you don't want to destroy yourself. You know, don't commit all of your own funds. Okay, mortgage the house and do everything else. Some people do that. You know, but try to get other capital. That's why the type of ownership you have. Do you have an LLC that is a corporation, or is this a personal thing? If it's a personal thing, you may be personally liable for anything that comes out of failure with your organization. If it's an LLC, there's a corporate structure that kind of protects you. You need a lawyer to help you with that. Okay, but no. Most of the people I know who are successful entrepreneurs usually have not done the first time out. They've had a couple of tries at least, and some several. And the fellow who worked for me, who was a PhD in chemical and chemical/biological, I think, he had worked in industry, actually for Upjohn and Pfizer Corporation. He went to a small startup. That one didn't do well. He went to another startup. That one did well. Came back into, I think he came back to Pfizer at that point. I was Upjohn originally, then Pfizer. And then came to the university. And he was he was the one who oversaw commercialization and entrepreneurship and working with startups and all the rest. So all of that, he was also a patent. An engineer, he was also a patent certificate or something. And we had legal teams, lawyers who did the patent surveys and all that to help us. So, but he had, you know, some failed, some didn't, but he was much better through the process. The trick is, if you really have a passion, don't let the first failure, you know, make you stop. Same thing with putting in grants. If you've written grants, you know, some people get discouraged. I had a faculty member once say, well, I put in a grant to the National Science Foundation, was turned down, I'm never going to write another grant. I go, really? Really? Because I've read lots of grants, proposals anyway. And yeah, don't be discouraged. In some fields, for example, I know at the National Science Foundation, you can, people don't get funded the first 3 or 4 proposals they put in. That's another thing. If you're writing proposals, just another side, if you're a junior faculty member, it sometimes helps to get a senior faculty member to be part of that proposal. You can be the lead, but if you have a senior person there as a, you know, co-PI or something like that, because the reviewers will look at that and say, because they're looking at, you know, why should I give you money? Are you going to be successful? So if you're a new faculty member with no track record at all, hopefully you have some by the time you get there, and they say, well, okay, you know, this may not go. It may, you know, it's on the edge. You got a senior faculty member there with a long track record. They say, well, this proposal is here, but you know, he's got a co-PI who has this horrendous, you know, tremendous, I should say, track record. Maybe we'll take a chance, you know, because we know that there's that type of track there. Doesn't work all the time. I'm just saying that, you know, sometimes it helps to have co-collaborators on there, particularly if you have gaps in your knowledge for a particular proposal, or even if you're going in to start up a business or whatever. Look to fill those gaps with people who know what they're doing. You know, if it's a senior faculty member, if it's a lawyer, if it's a business person, wherever the case may be, make sure you've got a complete package as you're moving forward. And you'll be more, I see that a lot in sitting on the board where we're trying to fund startups. Because we have a whole series of people, you know, legal, scientific knowledge, engineering knowledge, and all the rest. And they'll look at a plan and they say, well, yeah, this is a great plan, but they don't have a business person. They don't know how to commercialize this. Or they don't have, you know, legally they're not on sound ground. Their patents aren't prosecuted and those kinds of things. So make sure if you're going to do that, you know, get the expertise to bring in. I'm sorry, that was a long answer.
So before thanking you, I have a question.
Sure.
So I have professors that have been in industry for a couple of years and then they switch to academia. Does it really help, and how does it affect the people in universities who want to hire you? Does it help, or?
Oh, it will help you because you're a student of somebody who is had industrial
Well, you have
experience.
a PhD and you want to get a job.
Yeah.
But you stay in industry. You start your job in industry for a couple of years.
Uh-huh.
But then you switch to academia.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how, does it really help or?
Well, again, it depends on your field and your accomplishments, but from my perspective, certainly in engineering and science, particularly in engineering, I think it's helpful to have industrial experience because it shows that real world connection, frankly, to problems. Plus, you may bring, networking is always important. Networking, I mean, right now, among your fellow students, you have a network. You'll be surprised how that may extend for years later on. If you go into industry, you build a network. You know, you're in academia, you build a network. Hang on to, you know, keep, however you keep your data, keep those names and your relationships somehow in the back of your mind, because 15 years from now, somebody may give you a call, either asking for something or asking you to come join them. I've had that happen to me a couple times. Going to the National Science Foundation, I always wanted to do that. It turns out I was stepping down from my position, going on sabbatical, and it turns out that a friend of mine happened to be from the evaluation center, was talking to somebody down there who happened to be an old professor of mine back from RPI, and he said, oh, Dan's available this year, we have an opening. Okay, great. Those things happen. So build your networks and keep your networks. Okay?
Thank you. So,
Sure.
any more questions?
Yes, sir.
Is there any statistics of success rate of getting tenure?
Statistics of getting tenure?
Yep.
I'm sure there are. I can tell you, it depends on the university. Some are, some university people get more, higher ratios of tenure than others. At ours, usually if the vetting process is good, we talked about being honest and all the rest, and the match and all the rest. At our university, most people will get tenure. We do have people who do not get tenure. Usually that happens because they didn't live up to the expectations or something else happened. Now, if something happened like medical reasons, we can actually put a window in there and allow them to extend that 6-year period. I'm talking about performance-wise. They couldn't find funding, and, things just didn't work out. Their interpersonal relationships, which are very important, particularly in an open area, when you're teaching and we're working with colleagues and all the rest. If you cannot get along with your colleagues, to the point where it's terrible, chances are you're not going to get tenure, because that's an important part of certainly any professor, being able to interact